You should sit down, Tono, because if not, you are taking part of the. Oh, I need to be there. Oh, wait. What the time constraints?
Well, let's see how we go with 15 minutes. And if,
okay,
if you're really going well,
so,
people will stay online because we are compelling content.
15 minutes I have prepared or 2 hours panel, so I need to select. But I suggest that we have maybe key themes, benefits, barriers, gaps, and opportunities. Okay, just start to think about that. And maybe Jeremy, could you start from your perspective? What will be the greatest benefits if we achieve interoperable attestation scheme at scale based on open standard?
Okay, so there are, in my view, several things. The first is many vendors of silicon and the like, Qualcomm is not the only one, sell into a large number of verticals. We like to reuse IP. Obviously, there are cost benefits to us of reusing IP, but there are actually security benefits of reusing IP because we are likely to do a better job of doing one thing well than 25 things badly. So in terms of why it is important if you're a vendor, it is really about having the time to do something properly. The same actually applies across the ecosystem. If there is a common way of doing verification, verifiers are likely to be better. If there's a common way of describing policy, it's going to be easier for companies and relying parties and policy specifiers to build up expertise that they can take from one company to another. That would be my probably perspective on some of this.
So Thomas, maybe do you see similar benefits as a open source?
Well, of course, of course I do. I think there's a big network effect that comes from adopting open standards and open source components. One notable thing is that you get higher quality deliverables, as was noted by Jeremy, and you also share the cost, right? That's another important thing to note because you bring the expertise from different places together. You make them discuss, brain dump, share their views, construct a common vocabulary, analyze the problem and solution space. This is a very good thing that you can do, and then everyone benefits from that, I would say. As Jeremy said, of course, you remove frictions, and that in my book is always a good thing. Well, unless you are a vendor that wants to exercise some lock-in, I think it's good for the market to have this kind of situation enabled. And I would say one last thing is that with standardized environment, you have also a predictable user experience. You construct something that is homogeneous and is a solid ground on which you can build further stuff. Say, for example, regulatory stuff, this kind of higher level deliverables that can be built on top of a solid, well-analyzed, well-defined environment that is shared across.
Maybe a last one, Paul, do you extend this value on the business regulatory perspective, or do you see other type of benefits?
Yeah, I think so. For people that don't know me, I'm from the UK National Cybersecurity Centre, and we provide expert tech support to things like government policy and some of the regulators. And so I think having that kind of at-scale adoption gives us, in a way, the opportunity to set a regulation or to make a requirement, which we can't do if it's one or two organizations, or if there's only one technology option. It doesn't make sense to insist on it because we're distorting the market. But when we have open standards and a decent level of adoption, we can start to build these things into standards and requirements and actually drive up the resilience for our critical systems, which is kind of the main aim of the game, at least for us at the moment. So that's the main benefit that I would see. And we can't do that until we have that kind of adoption, or at least a path to it.
Okay. Do you have anything to add, or it's always difficult to be the fourth one on the template, right? So that's why. You can say that nothing to add. Or...
I think what I would like to stress is the scalability aspect. Is if you have standards-based approach, then the scalability really eases out. Otherwise, custom implementations are barriers for scalability, and the cost also comes down quite significantly if you are using a standards approach.
Okay, so I suggest we go to the second topic, which are the barriers. So moving to challenges, what do you see as the main barrier to achieve at-scale attestation today?
I mean, I think we need to kind of the scalability challenges is. I think your question is what are the roadblocks to.
Yes.
I think we still are in the process of developing standards for the emerging stuff. As I mentioned in my presentation, like we don't have sufficient standards when we want to scale. It's not just one component which needs attestation. When you're attesting a complete system, you need a kind of coherence, or you need some coordinated attestation ecosystem, and that's what we are aiming towards in next few years to standardize that. We just don't need component attestation, but a composite attestation is one of the main challenges. Apart from that, new challenges coming like agentic AI and stuff we need to think more about how we would leverage attestation and add trust based on attestation on use cases which involves agentic AI and stuff in the emerging technologies going forward. Yeah.
And Paul, for the national point of view,
I think it's about putting together a really good story for not necessarily the expert community, but the sort of the business focus, the regulators. What's the benefit? What's it really for? And I don't mean explaining all the edge cases. I mean just having a really convincing narrative about why we want this and where it's going to either reduce harm or save money, or ideally both. And the simpler we can make that, given the wide range of people with different levels of expertise in different topics, the easier it is to get the point across. I think it's my takeaway from the afternoon is that this is really complicated, right? There's a huge number of edge cases and a huge number of different scenarios, and we've got to have a sort of convincing, simple story that the lawyers understand and the accountants understand and that the politicians understand, and then that's not straightforward, but that's the bit that's missing for me at the moment, is the sort of really simple what's it all for.
okay. And Thomas, it's the barrier are what
What I see from my angle, right, is a narrow angle. I'm not at his level. But what I see is huge fragmentation, especially on the tester side. That is one thing. Yogesh mentioned standards, the fact that standards are lagging behind a bit, and I agree with this point. But I think people are starting realizing what the value of standardization is. For example, if you look at OCP, they're starting this EAT profile for the server market now, right? And then you have AMD, you have Intel, you have all these guys and participating in the effort, which is a very good sign. I mean, it's a bit, it's never too late, but you know, lagging behind. But it's a question of time for me. It's not an energy. It's not that people have not realized the value of that. To the point that possibly, yeah, people need to be educated to the value of these things. So why are we doing this stuff? What is, you know, providing as a value, right? So the digital connection that are trustworthy, right? This is the message, right? But this is not coming across very well. I think people do not understand, do not realize what attestation is in the first place and what the ramification of enabling attestations are in terms not just of, you know, setting up an attester, which is already or now a very complicated matter, but also setting up all the environment around that, the services and the trusted services stuff, and make it scalable and whatnot. So there's an education step, I think, also reach out, dissemination, which I don't know who's going to do that, but someone needs to do that.
Oh, good. I'm coming last.
Yeah.
So I mean, I will start by agreeing with everything so far. A couple of things I think I would add, you know, most of the people in this room are technologists. We love coming up with new ways to encode bits on wires and use new algorithms, and it is very easy to think that we understand the business requirements. Sometimes we overcomplicate them. Sometimes we undercomplicate them. The critical thing is that in a lot of the discussions that are occurring in standards bodies, the primary contributors are engineers. And for me, forums where we can bring in people who come from the verticals, the businesses and the governments and the institutions that might actually make use of this stuff, and they come along to us and say, oh, I need to do this. And I'll give a good example from myself. Up until about a month ago, I had never heard of trusted workloads. And so, yeah, what's a trusted workload? Why would I want one? And then I took a look at Mark's presentation at ITF. Oh, yes, obviously, of course you need to do this. But as a technologist, as somebody working in the depths of attestation for quite a number of years, this had simply never occurred to me because it's not in my normal day-to-day experience. And it is these things that we have too few opportunities to bring together the technologists with the business verticals. So for me, that's probably the biggest barrier to scale, because if we don't deliver something that relying parties, however you wish to define them, actually can use and can bring value to the value that they need, it won't be adopted. It won't be used.
Yeah, switch it to gaps, okay, after the barrier. So, and I will start with Paul. So Paul will be not the last one. But Paul, do you see gaps in assurance of compliance framework that needs some priority if you want to build a trusted framework as a national view?
So I think the sorts of things we want to do tend to be doing really simple things, but at scale. So rather than solving any edge case. So, an example of something I might want to know is some sort of graph or statistical information about all the devices on my system, which ones are up to date, which ones are out of support, which ones are on extended support. That ought to be just one query, and I ought to just get an answer back. And if that's possible, then I could ask an entity to report that data to a regulator. And I think that's currently quite hard. But it ought to be possible with this kind of technology. So there's an example of a gap that might give us a really simple first move. Is that the kind of thing you were after?
Any gaps you foresee?
Okay.
Because I suppose that potentially, Yogesh, you will have more view on the gaps in terms of the technology.
Yeah, I think in terms of technology, we have quite a divergent set of formats and stuff. We need a bit of harmonization. So as to connect the point which he just mentioned about it, the technology should connect easily. And the business point of view, connection also would happen if we make the technology simpler to deploy or easy to understand. And I think that's where we should aim at, to fill that gap, making it from complex to simple.
I really like the term empathy used in the presentation we just heard, where it was kind of, how do we make this as easy as possible for the person to use that's in the tricky spot of having to build one of these systems and have a stack of standards to read.
Now, Jeremy, the next one. So you will be the last one.
Okay. Yeah, you can start.
Be prepared.
Hooray. So in terms of where we need to go, I think the critical part is that sitting underneath Paul's very simple use case is something that from an engineering point of view is quite complicated in the sense that, okay, what's the first thing? We have to have an attestation format that can be understood. This clearly is going to come from chipsets and motherboards and other devices inside, which are from different vendors. And you would like, when you're building this service, to not have to, you don't want an explosion of complexity in your verifier, because absolutely everyone does things in such a different way that effectively it's a whole new verifier every time. You then need to think about, okay, other silly things like, well, actually, I probably need to have a service on a particular port, which my remote IT management system that is going to do this reporting can connect to, because if it's a different port on every single system, again, there's just more configuration. And so in many respects, the difficulty is trying to get to something that is as seamless and easy to use across a very large number of vendors as if it came from a single, very vertically integrated vendor. You know, if I, it doesn't really matter which ecosystem I choose. If I buy a wearable that is compatible with my phone, pairing the two together is pretty much trivial. And what we would like to do is to have some of those things be as easy as if they were created by a vertically integrated party. And that is a hard engineering problem. And it probably means not just adopting and adapting existing legacy approaches, but actually encouraging those ecosystems as quickly as possible to move away from the legacy and towards the standards.
So that's the last one. Maybe the gaps are in collaboration or innovation, or just to give you potentially some way to extend the potential
gaps
gap.
in collaboration, gaps in innovation. So to me, gaps means very specific things, right? I see practical stuff that needs to be solved. One of which is going back to Mark's presentation about the relying party friendliness, is the attestation result format and the harmonization around the attestation result format, which I think is a very crucial point to enable a smooth ecosystem. Because if we, the starting point is an ecosystem that is highly fragmented on the attester side, but we have a potential to reconcile that complexity within the verifier when the actual thing is spit out as an attestation result. And if that can be done in a way that is stable, right, that is abstract enough, that use a common language that all relying parties can understand, then we are making a very, very good step forward. And I think the R4C standard is going exactly in that direction. And what I need as someone that is actually doing writing down the standard is input from the industry to understand, to gather all the use cases that are relevant to that vertical and try to integrate the semantics for that vertical inside the thing, so that the vocabulary is rich enough to express, you know, things like around expressions of trust across different industries. Another thing is the one that we discussed already, the secure attested channels, fundamental primitive in an ecosystem like this.
Okay, so no, you need to start because
right.
That's the fourth topic, and about future use cases. So if you look ahead, what you think?
Unfortunately, I'm not a market guy, so I'm not qualified to answer this. I will pass the mic to anyone else.
I'm a market guy. Oh, I can see the opportunity to sell billions of chipsets. No, I mean, ultimately, one of the challenges that we have is that we built an internet on a foundation that assumed that everything was trustworthy. And we have learned over quite a number of years that maybe that original underlying assumption was not the best choice, even if it was the most practical implementation choice at the time. I think attestation is a very key component of being able to move to a world in which we no longer have to make those types of assumptions and build duct tape solutions on them, but rather say, and again, Mark really alluded to this as a business owner, you know, as a business, I should not have to care if this is in the cloud or if it's on my premises or whether it's running on an ARM server or an Intel server or, you know, some secret alien technology that's orbiting somewhere around the moon, provided that I can have trustworthy assertions about that thing that I'm interacting with. And that is something that currently we have rather limited ability to do. I mean, I can connect to a server and it tells me that a certificate authority that I have no reason to trust says that this server is fine. And I think that we're going to be able to go to rather better solutions. And so for me, that's kind of the future. The starting point is actually, can I just trust the device over there?
Okay, you might be last again. Yeah, I think it's related to a previous point about if we get to the point that this is easy enough to use and that we can start to connect it to other perspectives. So like the financial implications, like how do we take cost out of our supply chains by having more knowledge of what we've got and where it is? How do we more appropriately assign liability and responsibility for networks and devices and control based on getting this information and being able to make confident assertions about the state of things and how resilient a system might be, and then we can use that to write regulations that are easier to use and follow and are more efficient.
Okay, so still on the network and managing, but any other area or you foresee?
I mean, in terms of going forward, I would like to see, like, from a business point of view, the cost of attestation as a security feature should come down. Because the cost acts as a barrier. The cost and the complexity keeps it away from enabling it into the ecosystem actually. So whatever efforts or whatever initiatives we need to make it the cost down, the more it gets into the ecosystem and more we can elevate trust naturally and gradually. Yeah.
Okay, so I think I already extend my 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 50. Is there any question on the people connected or in the room to be able to use the expertise that is available for you? No? Ah, yes, Hank?
Yeah, hi, this is Hank. I'm in a public space. I hope it's not too noisy here now. It might not be so visible, but remote attestation actually is used a lot. If you look at everything that is in the CCF framework, the confidential consortium framework that Microsoft implements, Azure has moved to remote attestation. They have a root of trust. They can create evidence with all the capabilities about all their confidential nodes. It's there. It is in the product today, live. And they're just not basically selling it, not via the terms remote attestation, because nobody knows what that is, as we currently established. So the sales works differently than the technologist point of view that Jeremy, I think, pointed out at the start.
I think everybody say yes. I don't know if there is something to add.
I mean, I suppose the important thing you'd say is it's a great start that an at-scale provider of a cloud service has the underlying technology. Obviously, be good if all of the providers of those types of technologies provided a very similar service. Would equally be good to be able to translate that service more obviously into this meeting my actual business need, which is all, are all of the cloud servers I'm running on patched as I want them.
It's related to your comment earlier about vertical integration, though, I think, in that the people that like that example is someone has produced their own backend completely from scratch, and it's not a product you can buy. So in order to get someone else to use it, there's a missing bit that not everyone has enough engineering capacity to just do that. So we need to provide them with tools and that integrate and work.
Thanks. I think there is still a question.
Yeah, Sama here. So I wanted to follow up quickly on the discussions that were done in this panel. But before that, I want to talk about the issue that Hank is raising, or the comment that Hank made. Of course, it's available in Azure, but definitely for sure you have to trust Azure in order to do all of that. So I'm an academic, I'm honest, I'm not a marketing guy. So let's be honest, the TPM that lies in Azure, everything in there is mired under the control of Microsoft. So and Microsoft clearly says that they are not, I mean, they never claim that we are out of the TCB. So this thing we really have to really understand that Microsoft is not out of the TCB. They never claimed that. We should be very clear on that whenever we say that in such kind of things and so on. that should be really explicit that we do trust them for doing all of this business. And it shouldn't become a marketing field. We should really be honest. I think the way forward is not to do such kind of marketing, rather to be honest on what are the trust assumptions, what do we trust, what are the threats. We should be very clear to whoever we are selling these things to that these things are trusted, these are the threat models that you should consider, and these are the assumptions that if they break, then your security is broken. Rather than after every few months seeing that, oh, this is actually the technology was broken, like the TE dot fail and all of these things. So this is something that we really, as a community, have to work together in order to be very clear and honest on what these assumptions are, what do these technologies bring to the user, and how can they build trust on that. So if we build a trustworthy community, I think it will fly easier rather than just doing some marketing that, hey, it exists, just use it. And then they see some issue after 1 month and then they say, oh no, this was actually broken. So that's my main comment. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. So I will need to stop the questions and maybe to let 35 seconds for each panelist if they want to have the last word. Who wants to start? Paul, you have the mic. So
Just to recap, I think, we've got some awesome technologies here and some awesome capabilities, but we've got to start to understand the perspectives of the people who are going to use them and write them into policies and procurement contracts and build systems out of them and make it as easy as possible for them to do that, rather than get lost in the detail of how we'd like it to work and the different options for building different types of system. That's me.
35 seconds.
Let's make the technology easy to use, simple, and adaptable by adaptation at scale is my motto going forward. Yeah, thank you so much.
Fully agree. I might have a few ideas, but we don't have time enough to.
That's normally the seat of the fourth people to say that everything has been said before, not the third. Eh?
So I think the other thing we should remember as technologists is that sometimes when a technological solution starts to become complex, there are other types of solution. On the question of trust, there is one advantage that Microsoft has, which is that if they lie about their trustworthiness, I can sue them. And sometimes legal and regulatory solutions are simpler and more powerful, or at least sufficiently powerful than technological solutions.
Get the best out of their technology.
Yes, correct. So, from my point of view, sometimes I will actually prefer simplicity and solutions that come from other parts of the business over, I can add, I have to spend time formally verifying every line of my code, for example, which might take, it's taken SEL for 10 years to verify a kernel. I guess it's probably summing up time. First of all, thank you, everybody. We've